firmly believe it will be the people that help you achieve your goals. You can have the best laid plans, but here's the thing, culture always eats strategy for breakfast. The culture is what will get you to that goal way faster and way easier than if you just have the goal on its own. You need the people and the culture to get you there.
From humble beginnings, Insurance Claim HQ has grown to one of the largest property casualty firms in the country. We didn't do it alone, and you shouldn't either. Every week, we're talking to claims professionals and top experts from all over, all to help you grow your business and make you stronger. Let's level up together. I'm Galen Hair. Welcome to the Level Up Claims Podcast.
Most contractors don't lose people because of pay. They lose them because of culture. The chaos, the burnout, the lack of direction. It all starts at the top. Today, we're talking with Lee Miller, a business coach and host of the Conquer Contractor Chaos podcast, who's made it his mission to help trades entrepreneurs design culture with intention. From his journey in franchising to running multi-million-dollar service businesses, Lee breaks down how the right systems and the right people can turn daily firefighting into long-term freedom. Let's welcome Lee Miller. Lee, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey Galen, thanks for having me on the podcast, man.
So originally from Scotland, where in Scotland are you from?
I'm from Edinburgh originally, or just outside
Fantastic.
Edinburgh.
Yeah, Edinburgh's beautiful.
Oh, you've been? Yeah, nice.
Oh yeah, it's. I've only been to Scotland like once, but it was my favorite city there. Although the other place I spent significant time was Glasgow, and like comparing the two, there's just no comparison.
Absolutely not. But again, we got very similar cultures here, and I live in Canada now, so very similar cultures. Lots of Scottish people where I am, which is cool. But we get 4 proper seasons instead of just rain all the time, so it wasn't much of a change.
Yeah. So what brought you to North America?
So my wife actually has family over here. She's been coming here since she was a kid to come and visit extended family. And she brought me in 2014 for a vacation when we first got together. And then it was no looking back. We had to move. You know, it was great. I'm a big outdoorsman, love snowboarding, skiing in the winter, out hunting and hunting season. I live to be outdoors, and where's a better place than Canada for being an outdoorsman, right? So we moved 2016, been here just coming over 10 years now. And then, we've started a family here, bought our houses here, all that good stuff. So just living the dream, man.
That's awesome. So let's talk about how your career's kind of transitioned, because you've kind of been through it. You've built and scaled multi-million-dollar service companies. So you've been on the ground. You've got your own podcast, Conquer Contractor Chaos.
Correct.
How did you make this transition from kind of being on the ground day to day, building and scaling these companies, to moving towards coaching?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I wouldn't say that I've had your typical journey to get into where I am today, right? Like, as a kid, we grew up dirt poor. I mean, dirt poor. Like, me and my older brother shared a pair of shoes growing up for a little while. It was a rough childhood. And so we had to work, right? While everybody was living out their sports dreams and going out and partying at 20 and all that good stuff, we were working, always working. I actually started out when I left school. I was in the military for a few years, left that, and I got into construction very early on. So I was an industrial floor layer. And I did that all the way up until 2008. I worked myself up into like a crew lead position. I was running a crew of flooring guys. And I mean, you think about the flooring guys, you're on your hands and knees every day. Your back hurts constantly. Your knees are ruined by the time you're 21, it was not, it wasn't, I knew I didn't want to do it forever, right? My body just was telling me, hey, you can't do this forever. And I was also seeing a lot of the older guys who were in the industry as well, and saying, these guys are 55, 60, 65 years old. They've never moved up past the point of where I am right now. And so I was considering a change. And it kind of naturally came in the 2008 recession back in the UK, where all the construction shut down and I was out of a job. So we were kind of screwed there for a bit. And I said, well, do you know what? I'd be as well finding something new. And I went and started in hospitality of all places. I started behind the bar, pulling beers for customers, learning that whole side of the business. And up until that point, the only experience I'd had of being in restaurants was literally being in the bar having a beer after work with the flooring guys, right? Like just being a customer. But something clicked, right? Something clicked in me, and it told me, if you're going to be here, give it your all. You might learn something. It's not just as simple as, oh, give somebody some food or go do this or go do that. I said, if I'm going to be here, I'd be as well trying to learn as much as I possibly can. And so I would follow the managers around and I would say, what are you doing? And they say, oh, we're going to go and do the kitchen, safety inspection. I'd be like, great, can I come and do it with you? They're like, you want to do this? I'm like, yeah, I want to learn. And it went for everything. It went for health and safety stuff. It went into, cashing out at the end of the night. It was, planning, getting the security guys in for the weekend, everything, absolutely everything that they were doing. I wanted to know how to do it. And that really worked out for me because sooner than later, I was getting promoted into shift leader positions and then junior management positions. And then I actually worked my way all the way up to leader development for the business. It's called Wetherspoons. It's one of the biggest hospitality chains in the UK. They have about 2,000 pubs, restaurants, and hotels. So I was in learning and development, and they would fly me all over the UK. I'd stand up in front of 40 or 50 people who had just came to work for the company when they did a new open, and I'd say, who's worked in a bar before? And everyone would put their hand up, and I'd say, forget everything you know. I'm going to train you everything from scratch. And it was great. I loved it. And that was kind of the moment that I knew that I always wanted to be in leadership, development, coaching, mentorship. And that's where things kind of really took a turn. I met my wife when I was working in that business, and she brought me to Canada, fell in love with it, and then came here. And so we had a bit of a consultancy on the side. We were working for that company, but we also were doing kind of smaller mom and pop shop restaurants, cafes, and stuff like that, just as a consultant, going in and saying, hey, well, here's how we do it in the big business. Let me teach you how to do it on a smaller scale. And so when we moved to Canada, we were kind of on the fence with, what are we going to do? And a couple of opportunities came up. And the first one was for a moving company. It's called You Move Me. It's owned by O2E Brands. And if you've ever seen 1-800-GOT-JUNK,
yeah,
if you know who those guys are, it's the same parent company. And so the position got offered up for operations manager. And I figured, screw it, I'll jump in and see. And I got it. And it was a small moving company. It had 2 trucks. And over the years, put a little bit of sweat equity in. And then put some sweat equity in, and then actually ended up buying into the business.
Okay.
So bought into the business, we grew it to about 7.5 million. And then we bought another franchise that was failing. It was a painting company called Wow One Day under the same banner, and did the same thing again. It was about $180,000 in debt. We turned it around. It does about 4 million now. To this day, I sold that back in 2021 and became a full-time coach. So it's always been like people in development, systems, processes, taking things on a big scale that big companies are doing and drilling it down to smaller operations and taking it from there. So that's where I am today.
That makes sense. I mean, what a journey though, right? So first of all, it just goes to show like so many people, all those jobs we had when we were younger, working at I worked at Olive Garden, right. And it's the same stuff. Like, you can say whatever you want, like waiting tables at Olive Garden is maybe not the sexiest job. And it's not the one where you're necessarily going to move up and make it rich, but they have a process and it works. Right.
For sure.
And to the extent you can learn that process and bring that process to any other industry, whether that's a restaurant or not, you're learning. And, so kudos to you, number one, but I don't think you're so surprised to see yourself in the position you're in today, because it sounds like you knew the day you started working at that bar that you would end up taking whatever you learned and make it your own.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's more about like, if I'm going to be here, I'd be as well being here 110%. Because only I can change my situation, right? And if I'm going to be here, I need to learn skills to get me to that next level.
So let's talk about that, because I couldn't agree more. And I think that actually transitions into one of the topics I wanted to cover today so well, which is culture. I can't tell you how many people are listening right now and they're thinking, yeah, I wish my employees thought that way, right? That's why I'm here and they're there. But so how do you get buy-in? One of the things you talk about a lot is that your personal culture sets the tone for your company's culture. And I can feel that just coming out of you as you're talking. So we can start by talking about that, but where I'd like to eventually end is how we inspire those around us, those employees, to have that attitude of, I'm going to learn everything. I want I want to know everything about the business. I want to be great. So how do we get there?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's not something that just kind of comes out of nowhere. Like, culture needs to be intentional. And there's some really big benefits of focusing on that culture, which I'll get into in a little bit here. But for me, when looking back on it, because I have this internal culture, I was always looking at my employees being like, why are you not like me? Like, why are you not like me? Why don't you care? Why don't you care about this as much as I do? And I found that I was always getting disappointed. And it was because I was on this path and the route should have been easy. And it was the people that I needed to get me there, right? And they say, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go with others. It's one of the big sayings that I kind of live by. And so I said, well, something needs to change with culture. And I'll take the painting company as an example. When we first started, we had 10 employees that were there. There was crews that couldn't work together because they just didn't get along. The communication was garbage. Nobody spoke to each other. People would hold things and bottle things up, and then it would lead into these big explosions a couple of months later. And I kind of said, something needs to change. So, and if you ask a business coach, right, like, we use that kind of term business coach, but we all have little specialties, things that we really focus on that we're good at, the things we're best at. And I would say for me, like, the two things I'm best at is, one is I can tear a P&L apart like nobody. I can tell you exactly where your profit leaks are. And it's weird because I am not a math guy. But the other thing I'm really, really passionate about is building a strong culture, because I firmly believe it will be the people that help you achieve your goals. You can have the best laid plans, but here's the thing. Culture always eats strategy for breakfast. The culture is what will get you to that goal way faster and way easier than if you just have the goal on its own. You need the people and the culture to get you there. And so there's two big lessons that I dove into. There was a book that I read. It's called Tribe. It's written by a guy called Sebastian Junger. It's on my shelf just behind me here. And he brings up the concept of these intrinsic and extrinsic values, right? Have you ever heard intrinsic, extrinsic values before?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, 100%. So competency in what you do is number one, right? And there's ways that we can, help our employees get there: training, onboarding, giving them good systems, feeling authentic, making them feel like you don't have to lie about who you are or what your skill set is. We've hired you based on core values and we want to give you that skill set, right? You don't have to lie about being better than you actually are. And then the last one is feeling part of something bigger, being on a mission or being on a venture with other people that are like-minded. And that's where I really started, was saying, well, how can I make sure that if I'm going to have the audacity to bring people into my business, how can I make sure I give them the things that they truly care about at a human level? So let's design it. Competency, right? Bomb-proof onboarding, bomb-proof training, bomb-proof systems that you don't fail, the system fails. And that's okay. That's okay if the system fails. We can fix that. How do we make you feel authentic? Well, we tell you where you're at. We tell you where you're going, and we're always truthful. We rush to tell you. We over-communicate. This is one thing that, so many people will just bottle things up, and then the next thing you know, that guy just leaves in the background. You're just like, wait, I thought everything was fine. There's a reason why he didn't come to you and tell you, hey, listen, something's wrong. And then part of something bigger. What's your vision? What's my vision? And I always say that with your employees, you can have a vision and they can be with you for part of the way. They might not be there the whole way. And they're not going to, just because you have that goal doesn't mean that's going to become their goal. But it's about, here's my vision. What's your vision? And how do we cross paths on our way to get there together? Right? And if you want to step off, that's fine. If you want to go be a circus clown and you're working for an electrician company, how can I support you as the employer in your journey on where you're going in return for you helping me with mine for part of the way? This is fundamental, But see, what employers do is we mistakenly look at the extrinsic values. They go, how can I give you money and status? Those two big, let me throw money at you. Well, people don't really care about money. Yeah, it helps them survive. But if the intrinsic values are missing, well, you're not feeling fulfilled, you're not feeling committed, you're just there for a paycheck. And I heard this saying once, and it was actually a contractor that I'd hired to come and work on my house. and his apprentice was talking to another apprentice, and he said, "I'm here for the income, not the outcome." And I went, "Oh my God, there's no way that that's your culture. Tell me you know nothing about intentionally building the culture." So intrinsic versus extrinsic values is where it really starts, is how am I showing up for my employees and actually purposely putting those intrinsic values at the forefront and encouraging that with my employees.
But that makes perfect sense. At the outset, like, to kind of rephrase a different way to make sure we're on the same page, like, you have to understand the intrinsic value of your employees as well as the intrinsic values they hold, right? What's important to them on a very, very like gut level, like in their very marrow, not just money, not just, they want to provide for their family, what really, really matters to them. And it sounds like you need all that in place first before you can even move to that next step, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, you need to understand your own intrinsic values or your own core values. Like if you're just in this for the money, you'll never grow something amazing. You might do well for a while, but it'll only go so far. So your own core values are really what drives it. I like to explain core values as kind of like a sailboat when it comes up to port, right? It drops anchor and they take their little tender off to the island or whatever. And the environment changes, that sailboat goes up and down with the tide and it spins around and round, but it never goes further than the length of that chain that's connecting it to the anchor. That's your core values there. And if you're missing that, well, you're gonna find it incredibly difficult to own a business, right? You're gonna find it incredibly difficult to own a business, for sure. The other part to this as well, right? Like, and I mean, this is where we kind of have to get a little bit geeky about this, but Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and I don't know if you're aware, but if you've read any, psychology textbooks or anything like that, you might be aware of this. And people very rarely get past the first two levels of that. And I've got it printed out here for you. The first two parts of that triangle, physiological needs, air, food, water, shelter, sleep, clothing, and reproduction. Don't reproduce with your staff. Don't recommend it. So, but yeah, like how do we give that as an employer? Well, we do that with the paycheck, right? The minimum level of transaction. You show up and work for me, I'll give you money. That's an extrinsic value, right? You get to survive. We need to move people past the point of survival and into that kind of higher up level of, hey, now I'm really safe. Now I can really push myself. I'm not going to lose my job. The only way is up from here. So if we can get past those like physiological needs and move up into the next one, which is totally relevant for you and your listeners, which is safety, right? And we can make safety not just physical safety, but also mental safety as well. If we can make that part of our culture and part of our process for bringing people into our business, well, and here's a cool stat for you is, and I think this was actually put out by OSHA, was people who have an intentionally built culture, a strong culture in their business, have up to 50% less claims.
Wow.
This is it's a measurable, it's a measurable number that you can put on that by having that culture. How do you measure culture? Well, there you go. There's just one metric. And if that's a number of claims, if that's the metric we're measuring, imagine what the metrics would look like on performance, retention, recruitment, right? If you were to adopt this whole, 5 steps. So physiological needs, paycheck, stable work hours, maybe some health and dental benefits, safety needs, that's going to be actual physical safety, but it's also safety standards that you set or safety checks that you do if you're telling your employees, hey, I care about you guys. I don't want you hurting yourself. But then it's also predictability. It's also stability, stable work hours. That's safety as well to somebody. And once you get past that point, this is where the magic really happens. When you get to the love and belonging portion, which is the next stage, friendship, intimacy, family, sense of connection, this is where people really start to work for the other people in their team. And I'll give you an example of a time where I've seen this go the opposite way. And you might have seen this in Olive Garden. But when you work in hospitality, it's a culture of suffering. We stay because we're all suffering together. We have to deal with rude clients. It's tough work. We're out late every night working. We want to go home. That's a bad culture. However, when you have a team of A players that you've hired based on those intrinsic values, based on those core values, right? I want to be here because I'm competing at the highest level with A players just like me. So I typically don't recommend telling your employees that you're a family, but like you're like a family. I hear this all the time. Like, oh, we're like a family. Don't be like a family. Be like a pro NFL team. Trade out when you need to trade out, and communicate that, right? That's part of that authenticity. I'm going to communicate, hey, if you're not playing ball, if you're not playing well, we might need to trade you out.
Yeah. Yeah, we're here to build the best team possible.
Yeah, 100%, right? It's who you let in. And I think Simon Sinek said this best, where he's got this book, it's called Leaders Eat Last. Don't know if you've ever read that one, but it's a really good book. And he says, you know, back in kind of like Paleolithic times, the role of the chief was not to sit in some internal nucleus protected by the cannon fodder on the outside. The goal of the chief was, if you want a strong tribe, you have to patrol that outer circle, deciding how big it gets and who gets in. And the better the people that you let into your tribe, the more you will prosper as a tribe overall. So, you know, team culture, good leadership, recognition and support, like these are all, open communication. These are all factors of the love and belonging phase. If you can have a plan for, you know, all of those things, team culture, leadership, recognition, open communication, you're on the path. You're on the path to enlightenment. When we get into esteem, this is where you really want to say, well, hey, here's where your future is going. If you do X, Y, and Z, here's how you move ahead. And so if we give praise, awards, shout outs, trust and autonomy, more training, career progression, this is where you're really starting to get people who, one, care about what you're trying to do, but they will go to bat for you. They will be there with you. They will focus with you and help you achieve your goal. And then once that's done, it's all like they take the next phase themselves, called self-actualization. And this is where they want to come in and be challenged. They're up for the challenge, and they're doing it for a noble cause, which is your vision together, you know? And then, personal development, and then coaching and empowerment. And this is my favorite one, because this is where they start to coach and empower others in your business. When they've maxed out or almost maxed out, that's when they go, I want to teach somebody else. Which kind of resonates with me, because that's a little bit of my story here, right? Is I maxed out, I've done the thing, you know, we hit that, learned a load of stuff. Now I want to show other people how to do it. And if you can do that, if you can master intrinsic, extrinsic values, and if you can master Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you will give yourself two incredible tools that you can use to build a good team and crush every goal that you're trying to crush, if you focus on those two things.
I mean, you made it sound easily. I don't know. But the reality is it's complicated, right? Because you have to keep reminding yourself. I think we as people tend to fall into this survival mode, right? Especially in business. Get that money in now, do this now. And look, you have to do that to some extent, but continuing to focus on your team's intrinsic values and continuing to think about how they're being taken care of, you know, from like a Maslow's hierarchy standpoint, that requires discipline, a lot of discipline. Yeah. So what are some things you tell your clients to remind themselves when they're making decisions, you know, when they're making even micro decisions, to make sure it's consistent with their desire to build an intentional culture?
For sure. Yeah. So we kind of operate from the side that everything that happens in your business is your fault. So if you have an employee that maybe isn't living up to the culture that you want to see, you let them in. You let them into that tribe. And there's only one of two reasons why that is. It's either a competency issue or it's a commitment issue. And it's two very different answers, you know, to how we deal with that problem. Competency, well, training, onboarding, right? Leadership. Commitment, that's the only controllable we have when it comes to commitment, is what our culture is built intentionally to. So when my clients are coming to me and they're saying, hey, I've got a really hard decision to make when it comes to culture, I try and simplify it as much as possible. I say one of two things. One, would you work for that person in an alternate reality? Would you work for them? And if the answer is no, you've probably got the wrong person in your business. The other way, I'd say, if that guy passed away, would you go to his funeral? And if the answer is no, you don't have a connection with that person deep enough that they should be in your business. Every single person you let in, you let through the gates. And it's not about the hard decision you need to make. It's the conversation. You need to rush to that conflict. And you need to say, hey, I can either sit back and relax and let this keep going on because I'm scared of having the conversation, or I can do us both a favor. I can tell that guy exactly where he stands. And I can admit to myself that this is dragging me down. And there is a way for you to start building your culture today. And I can share that with your
Yeah.
listeners.
How do you start? All right, let's get started. How do we do this today?
Yeah. So it's like anything, right? You're going to build something. What do you need? You need a blueprint, right? You need a schematic, a plan, a goal. And it starts with your vision is what is the vision I have for this team? What kind of metrics do they hit? How are they compensated? How are they rewarded? I need to build that plan first. And a really easy way to do this is say, instead of what do I want my team to do, you need to ask, what do I want my team to feel? And you work back from that. How do I want them to feel when they show up every day? For me, the exact mantra that I used in my business was, I want my business to be the least stressful thing in my employees' lives. They can go home and have their relationships, they can have their hobbies, they can have all the stuff that we need to do as humans. And I'm also of the firm belief that our brains were never designed to deal with the amount of stuff that we need to deal with. Taxes, childcare, like all of these things. We have to simplify, right? We have to simplify things down. So I need to say, how do I become the lowest point of stress in my employees' lives? This, and some people look at that as weakness. Some people go, oh, well, these guys, I'm paying them a paycheck. They should just show up and work. And they will show up and work, but not at their full capacity, not at 110%, not with an ounce of care. 5 o'clock rolls around, they're out the door. So but it starts with a plan. How do I want them to feel? And then building it intentionally. The second thing I need to ask is, what is currently holding me back from implementing this culture that I want to have? And it's really hard to go back and kind of retroactively fit a brand new culture. It's easier to do it in the beginning. If you've got 1 or 2 employees, start now. Start with yourself. If you're self-employed and it's just you, start with the culture for yourself and then build from there. So if you look back and you say, hey, here's what I've got, here's the reasons why I couldn't implement this culture in my business. Well, you need to fix that first. This isn't the right guy. We don't have the right systems. We don't have the right tools, the right processes. You kind of need to fix that first. Once you've done that, all you need to do is put it in place. Communicate it, commit to it, announce it, tell your people what you need from them, and you're off to the races. And I don't think anybody's going to argue back with you if you said, hey guys, I want to make this a better place to work. Is anybody going to say no? No, that'd be crazy. That would be crazy. But it starts with intentionally building your culture. One little tidbit here, guys, is when it comes to culture, if you do not intentionally build it yourself, your employees will build it for you. And that can either be a good culture or a weak culture.
It becomes the culture that they want, which isn't usually the culture they actually want to be successful. It's the culture they want to be entertaining to them. And that's where I think it gets dangerous, is the dramatic culture, I think, comes to the forefront when either A, you participate in it, or B, you allow it to exist, right?
Of course.
If you have culture by default, I think that drama will happen, drama, conflict, all those things. And that's not because your employees are happy in that situation. It's because it's what they know best. That they've all worked places that were super dramatic and toxic. And so they just know how to be in that environment. It's just, but it's not what you want, and it's going to slow down your business, harm it. And you'll take that home as the owner too, right? Like I've had phases where the firm got a little toxic, while I was gone, and, came back, and I found it weighed on me heavier than it probably weighed on them, so I wasn't happy either. So I had to come in and kind of take the reins and make sure that I was happy with who was in my outer circle.
Absolutely. And it doesn't, Rome wasn't built in a day, neither will your culture. It takes time, it takes effort. You're going to screw it up for sure. We all have, but the biggest part is it doesn't matter how much AI or zaps you can do or whatever. You're still selling to humans. You're still working with humans who are doing the work. And if you forget that humans have needs other than just a paycheck, well, how long are you really going to go for? You can automate as much as you want. You can outsource as much as you want. But ultimately, if you're going to have the audacity to hire people in your business, you need to make them good ones, and you need to give them what they need to do what they do best. And that is a certain level of security and a certain level of vision And if they're not the types of people, and again, this is why, only 7% of the world's population actually own businesses and the rest of them work for them. And the way I see it is there's 7% of the world's population have a good vision and they want to take people along with them. The rest of them, they don't really have a vision. They're just going, well, life is what life is, Yeah. I've seen people who are 65, 70 years old, still working for someone else and going, well, I'm not getting that paycheck. I really wanted a raise, or I really wanted this. And I'm like, dude, you can go and get that. Yeah, if you really want it, you can go and actually take it. Don't just sit back and wait for someone to offer it to you. We do this in our business where if we bring an employee in for the painting company, for example, we'll say, here's exactly how much you're going to make, when you're going to make it, what skills, what performance, what metrics you're going to look after, what training you've had. And only when you check these boxes, will you hit that rate. If you hit all those skills in a week and we check you off, you'll get that rate. We're putting no barrier. There's no tenure. There's no tenure to when you're going to make more, be more, act better, be bigger than you are. It's all on you. And we're going to give you every tool that you could possibly need to get there. Because when you know more, when you can do more, when you can be more, that helps me get to my vision faster. And so many people don't have that. So many people
I
don't
could not
have
agree
that.
more. Lee, we are nearing the end of our time. So before we go, though, I do have to ask you one last question. What does it mean to you, sir, to level up?
What does it mean to me to level up? Great question. I would say the leveling up is breaking a barrier down and then discovering who you are after you've broken that barrier. When you've hit a level and you've said, right, okay, I can do this. What's next? You're walking into every level with a newfound set of skills, a new sense of purpose, a new competency. I would say that really leveling up is that, just like a video game, you beat the boss, you move up to the next level, you've got that new armor, you got that new sword or whatever. That's really leveling up to me.
I love that. That's awesome. Lee, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Galen. It's been fun.
Thanks to Lee Miller for joining us on the podcast. As you can see, Lee is incredibly passionate about culture, but it's not just building some culture that you think fits in your mind as to what you want your company to be. It's meeting your employees where they are and taking care of their needs in a way that transcends simply giving them a paycheck. So, if you're facing culture issues, and we all do, take a second, take a step back, and think, who do I really want to be to my employees, and how do I want to take care of them in a way that is much more than a paycheck?
Follow us on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast player.